Hello and welcome to That's Not Current. Today we're having a look at the PlayStation Classic, which is a new plug-and-play console by Sony containing 20 original PlayStation 1 games. This console's basically in the same style as the SNES and NES consoles of which Nintendo have recently brought out, which also contain a number of classic games. There's already been a bit of controversy with this console, being that it doesn't have the games of which people necessarily wanted on the console, and there's some sketchy goings on with the emulation it uses to play the games, but nevertheless we're going to have a look and try and keep a positive head. So to start us off, the packaging of which the PlayStation Classic is within is lovely. It looks just like the original box of which the original PlayStation 1 came in, which is something that's obviously going to spark a lot of nostalgia within people. As much as we probably don't want to admit it, the reason you would buy one of these consoles is for sheer nostalgia. Basically what you're looking for is a similar experience to what you had back in the day when you originally got one of these consoles. And as soon as anyone mentions nostalgia these days, I can't help but think of the member berries from South Park trying to lead us all astray and make us think that everything was brilliant back in the past. But nevertheless, that is what this product is for. And that's who it's aimed for. It's aimed for your average Joe who wants to get some fond memories brought back from his head using plastic and cardboard. One thing that is very hard to fault when companies make these mini consoles is the amount of detail that goes into the model itself, and that's essentially what it is. It's a model, it's something that's going to look really good on a shelf. It doesn't affect like the playability of the console itself. It's more or less just a collector's piece and something again that's going to bring back those nostalgic memories of your past. And when you open up this package, you're basically getting the full shebang. You're getting your power cable, you're getting your HDMI cable, and you're getting two controllers, which is a rarity these days because when was the last time you bought a console and you got two controllers? You're not going to get that with any modern day console. You're going to get ripped off and you're going to have to go down to Argos and pay more than what a game costs for a controller. But anyway, and I don't want to cause another argument on the internet by saying that it's just a collector's piece, because I know a lot of people will be out there saying, but why don't you just use emulation, or why don't you just use a Raspberry Pi? And it's, you know, it's not for you, this console, if that's the way you're thinking. This console is for the people who want it, and that's basically the gist of it. One of the first things you're going to notice with this console is how small it is. It is adorable. It's basically a little baby PlayStation, and if you have an original PlayStation, it's a lot of fun to pair them together and pretend that they're a family. I'm also pleased to say that the controllers that come in the box are identical to the original PlayStation controller. The fact that what you're getting in the box is a brand new PlayStation controller, identical to the one that came with your original console, adds to that sort of nostalgia. And, you know, when was the last time you held a PlayStation controller and it wasn't covered in 10 million years of dead skin? As you can see, my controller is filthier than a Witherspoon's cubicle. Sony also done something fantastic when designing the new controller, because they've made the USB cable on the new one look like one of the plugs of the old one. So this is something that annoyed me with Nintendo's mini consoles, because they used those nunchuck controller port things that were on the bottom of a Wiimote for their controllers, and it just looks a bit silly. So as you can see, with the controller plugged in, it basically still looks like the original console, but Sony have actually kind of missed out on an opportunity here, because with the original memory cards, what they could have done is they could have used Vita memory cards and made it so that you can add new games to this console. Not only would this have given Sony an opportunity to extend the life of the PlayStation Classic and ensure that people continue to buy them, but it means that people would also not get bored of the PlayStation Classic once they've completed all the games. In fact, Sony could have been the first company to make a mini console of which you could add new games into. Imagine that, you could go out to the shop and buy new games for a mini console. You could physically insert a cartridge. This was a huge missed opportunity. But hey, what do I know? Sony probably just wanted to make something cheap and cheerful that was smaller than the original console. So let's get this thing fired up and ready to go. We could have a look at some of the games that are on it, we can have a look at some of the settings that are on it, we can basically just mess around with it and see what delights await for us. You don't have to use the cables in the box, you can use the ones that are already connected to your TV if you like. So the first thing you'll notice is that the menus are rather basic and aesthetically they look like the original console's menus. You'll also notice that there's some instructions there on how to use the buttons on the front of the console, such as using the open button to change discs in games that require it, and you'll also notice that the famous PlayStation intro doesn't actually show up until you select the game. So I've started off with a game I'm really familiar with, and that's Metal Gear Solid. Now, I'll say right away that this emulator that the PlayStation Classic is using isn't using any fancy settings. In fact, you can't actually change any of the emulator settings through the menus. It's basically just how it is how it is. Now, for old PlayStation games, sometimes that could be a bit of a pain, because when you put an old PlayStation game on a modern screen, it doesn't always look great. Especially since it's early 3D and a lot of that can look dated. Don't get me wrong, the game looks fine, but it would have been nice to have some filters or some, you get scan lines and things on the newer sort of mini consoles, and you probably get it in a lot of emulation software as well, but it just seems to be totally missing here. And I'll be the first to admit I don't really know anything about emulation, but what I will say is when you buy a new piece of hardware and it's got games on it of which you've played for years on various different consoles and computers, you expect them maybe to look a little bit better or a little bit enhanced, just so that, it's familiar content but something that looks a lot better than if you tried to set up an original console yourself. It's at this moment though that I'm reminded that this console isn't necessarily for me. It's for the auntie or the uncle or the brother or the sister who of which doesn't usually game, and they come across this console and they think, you know what, I fancy playing some of those old games I used to play in the 90s. And I suppose at the end of the day, this console does what it says in the tin. It's a mini PlayStation of which plays 20 preloaded games. Now, you can argue all day about what games are preloaded in it and what the emulation's like, but at the end of the day, if someone buys this and they see the games on the back and they think, I want to buy that because it has this game or that game on it, then they're going to be perfectly happy. And to play devil's advocate, that doesn't mean I don't have a problem with what Sony have decided to do with the PlayStation Classic. There's a huge unanswered question about why they chose the games they did to be preloaded onto this console. And this might just be my personal opinion, but really, Sony should have just went all out and stuck the absolute classics on this console. I mean, if Sony had decided that they were absolutely only going to have 20 games on this console, then why did they give one of those slots to Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six? It's hard to even call this game a PlayStation Classic because this game was actually on PC and then was ported to consoles, and the reviews of this game speak for themselves. It got panned on the PlayStation. And if I'm right about who this console's actually marketed towards, I don't think that anyone who doesn't usually play games and they just want to have a bit of casual fun is going to like this game. It's far too clunky to control. But maybe I'm being a bit harsh because there is a lot of good games on here like Final Fantasy VII and Persona and Wild Arms, and these games actually cost quite a fair bit of money. But then on the flip side of the argument you get the likes of Tekken 3, of which is a brilliant game, but for some strange reason Sony have decided to stick the European PAL version on this console. Now I'm personally used to that version, but if you're American and you use NTSC, you're going to notice that this game is a lot slower than you're used to. So to summarise our look at the PlayStation Classic, it's a lovely piece of collectible hardware of which is going to please those casual gamers out there who want to play some of their old favourite games. If you're a gaming fanatic or a retro enthusiast, however, there's going to be a lot left to be desired. It honestly feels like Sony missed a lot of opportunities when making this console. I mean, they could have been the first to make a retro mini console that could do more than what its competition can do. I actually can't help but wonder what could have been if Sony used their old PlayStation TV technology, of which is based on the Vita architecture, and used that to make a retro mini console, because they could have basically made something of which isn't just a one-off plug and play. They could have made something that was its own platform. But that was our look at the PlayStation Classic, and I'm sure you'll let us know your opinion down in the comments. Bye!